At some point in our lives, we all get knocked down, right? And sometimes it's a career setback, sometimes it's a personal loss and you're grieving. Sometimes it's something that no one else sees, but maybe you feel it internally every single day. And I was thinking about the people that inspire us the most. We all have them, it might be different for everybody. But they're the ones who they stand up again and again, and they don't just come back, they come back wiser than they were before the setback. So if you want the next decade to be your decade, one skill stands out that really multiplies everything. So according to the World Economic Forum, they list resilience along with flexibility and agility among the top 5 core skills employers say that workers need now and increasingly through 2030. And I think it's especially important in the age of AI and amidst so much change that employers are telling us that resilience and adaptability is no longer optional. It's decisive for who's going to thrive in the coming decade. And why now? Because the rate of change is fundamentally shifted. Companies are restructuring quicker than ever. Technology, like I said, with AI, is disrupting entire industries in months now. And the half-life of specific technical skills keeps shrinking. But the person that can absorb change and learn from setbacks and maintain performance under uncertainty becomes invaluable during this time. And not because they're unbreakable, but because they're adaptable. And in a world where the only constant that it feels like we have right now is change, and we hear about employees and ourselves, I've experienced it, experiencing change fatigue. Resilience is a skill that makes all other skills renewable. But before we go any farther, just think about this. When did you last bounce back from something that should have broke you? That feeling, that moment, maybe it was something specific that comes to mind right away, and you remember the day, you remember the feeling, and just not feeling like you would ever be okay again. But here you are. So keep that in your mind. And I think that helps us understand what the core of this skill, resilience, actually is, and why it's so important in the next coming decade now more than ever. I like to look at dictionary definitions when I really dive deep into a skill. So it doesn't stop there, but it can start there. And the dictionary definition of resilience is the capacity. I'm not talking right today, but you know what? I'm going to be resilient and I'm going to start again. I'm going to bounce back. The dictionary definition of resilience is the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties. But emotional resilience goes a step farther. It's the ability to adapt to stress and adversity in a way that protects your well-being while keeping you effective. And for some reason in my brain, you ever read something and you're like, I get it, but I don't it doesn't hit you to your core. You know, they say you don't understand something until you could teach it to others. So you're like, well, yeah, okay, I understand the top level. I understand the definition, got it. But what helps me a lot of times is looking at antonyms, because when I see the gap between what something is and the opposite of what what someone would be who had the total opposite trait, that helps me process it. So the opposite of resilience, again, according to the dictionary definition, and the antonym is rigidity. And that really helped me wrap my mind around it even more. Because we all know someone who has more of a rigid mindset, right? Or if little details change, it just throws them totally out of whack. And that helped me understand the opposite, that effect, and what being resilient really means, and the ability to be adaptable, the ability to overcome obstacles and be okay with change. And rigid thinking resists change and clings to a single plan, doubles down maybe when evidence shifts, and then just drains momentum from teams because It treats any kind of change like a threat rather than an opportunity, even if it's the right one. It can't handle change, but resilient thinkers bend without breaking and adapt without losing themselves. One thing I want to mention is that I think there's a misconception that to be resilient, you have to be this incredibly tough, just warrior. And maybe you are, and that's great. But resilience doesn't always have to mean that. I think resilience oftentimes is soft. Resilience isn't always a hard shell. I think true resilience doesn't have anything to prove. And some of the most resilient people lead with kindness. And it looks like calm in a storm, empathy under pressure, steady presence, and the choice to keep showing up for others while you carry your own weight. And one thing that I really like that helps me find my inner resilience, one of my role models, Evie Pomporis, she wrote a book called Becoming Bulletproof. She's a former Secret Service agent. And she writes about having a go-to source of motivation that you can revisit when life hits, basically. So a song, a movie, a speech that anchors you. And for me, it's Rocky against Apollo, Rocky 1. I grew up on the Rocky movies. My dad played them on repeat for me, so they're very ingrained in me because he just stressed to never give up. Not to be the best, not to be the most talented, but just to never ever give up and to be the hardest worker. But it's Rocky 1, round 14, and Rocky gets knocked down, and everybody thinks he's not going to get up, but he does. And it's here that that scene teaches that resilience isn't about never feeling defeated. Rocky is defeated in that moment. I mean, he's on the mat, he can barely see. You're allowed to feel defeated. There will always be blows that drop you. You're not always going to feel okay. But Rocky made a promise. As long as he had air in his lungs, he will go the distance. He will keep coming back, and he'll make it to round 15. And David Goggins actually, he called out this specific moment in either a podcast or one of his books. And I've been a lifelong Rocky fan. But when he called out the specific scene, I was like, yes, absolutely. That is one of the best scenes in the movie. And I connected that with what Evie Pomporis says. And now I've made that my go-to scene. But the defeated feeling isn't weakness, it's human, but it's getting up and it's rising anyway. And that's what I love in that whole movie and in that scene. So for some they're round 14. Maybe it's like mine, maybe it's Rocky, but for others maybe it's a different hero that you have. Maybe it's someone that you know that is still working at 80. But whatever yours is, just think about it and hold on to it, because that's something that when you are feeling down, when you're feeling like giving up, just like Evie Pompora says, have that have that go-to song, that go-to movie in your mind that you can use when you need to bounce back. And like David Goggins says, if you can think about Rocky in round 14 when everybody thought he would give up, but he just keeps coming back, and he didn't have to win. He just wanted to go the distance. And the interesting thing to me too is that you might hear about the word grit. At least I've heard of that. The research that Angela Duckworth has done with grit is fantastic, and the resilience and grit go hand in hand. But Angela Duckworth defines grit as perseverance and passion for long-term goals. And her research shows that grit predicts success across places like West Point and the National Spelling Bee, just a really within most domains. And the way that I think about the difference is, um, when you're hit with a setback, right? Getting through it is being resilient, and the actions that you take to move forward, that's where the grit comes in. And there's a framework that I came up with after doing some research that helps me, and I ended up using um, AI, so I made a custom GPT to turn this into an exercise because for me, this is an example of how I use AI for my own personal growth. But for me, when you have that hard time, when something happens, that's when you really rely on self-talk. But if your vision is clouded in that moment, then your self-talk isn't going to be as strong as it is when you're having a great day, right? But that's where AI can come into play and be really helpful because if you have it pre-prompted already with this framework and it knows the different steps to take, it knows how to help you bounce back from a setback that you're having in the moment, and it can step in and almost be that self-talk for you. That from my experience, that's helped me when I've had setbacks. And of course, if you have a friend, if you have a loved one, they can talk with you too. One thing that I like about AI for this is that I don't always want to be the person that is leaning on friends and family when I have a setback, and that might sound bad, and there are times that absolutely you wouldn't want to turn to a chatbot, at least at first, for a major crisis, right? But I think some of the things that can weigh on us the heaviest are the smaller things that happen in our life that we don't want to share with others, that we use our own internal self-talk for, but that voice becomes clouded. And then we end up doing ourselves a harm and a disservice. So I'll walk you through this process, and I call it the GRIT framework. So in short, G is grace, R is recognize, I is interpret, and T is take action. So having the grace to accept it, recognize and name it, name the emotion, interpret, so you're interpreting it to reframe it, and then T, take action to change it. So I'll start with grace. Giving yourself grace is so important because, like I said, it is okay to feel defeated. You are not always going to like rubber band bounce back right away. And according to research from the University of Michigan, self-compassion lowers shame and helps you think more clearly when things go wrong. And without it, people can spiral into self-criticism instead of adapting. So dropping the expectation that you're never allowed to feel not okay, giving yourself that grace to feel low sometimes, and to not shame yourself for feeling that way. That's an important first step. And I will say it's a first step, and that's why it's step one. It's not the only step because it will be different for everybody and for every situation. And Evie Pamporis talks about it in her book too. But when something bad happens, you're allowed to feel bad about it, but you have to set a timer. You have to set a limit for how long you let yourself feel that way before you pick yourself up and you keep going because you have to. And again, I think that that's different for every person in every situation. The next is R, so recognize. Name the feeling. Whatever that emotion is, whatever that frustrating feeling is. Are you feeling frustrated, angry, scared? And it sounds silly. It sounds elementary almost, but UCLA research shows that labeling your emotions calms the brain's emotional center and activates areas that help with regulation. So it's calming the amygdala. And this keeps your nervous system in a zone where you can respond instead of just reacting. And I really like this. This has helped me a lot. And I noticed that I can struggle with feeling fear. And I don't know why always. I don't know where it comes from, but I might think about a situation and I just feel this sense of impending doom. Isn't that fun? Who doesn't love a good old sense of impending doom every now and then? And I definitely try to be a positive person, and at the same time, though, just try to stay aware of my emotions, and I notice that sometimes if I feel icky about something, I can drill it down to feeling afraid. When I actually say out loud that I'm feeling afraid of this meeting, or I'm feeling afraid of this outcome that might happen, that really helps me because, again, labeling your emotions calms the brain's emotional center. So you're calming the amygdala. The next step is I, so interpret. When I think about interpret, I think about reframing a situation. AI is also really helpful with that, by the way. But a 2024 meta analysis found that cognitive reappraisal, so deliberately shifting how you interpret events, acts like a stress buffer. And a 2025 study showed that reappraisal is uniquely powerful at shifting tough emotions. When researchers tested reappraisal based interventions on the job, people's performance actually improved in measurable ways. So this is one step right here is a way that you can become more resilient at work. This is proven, right? And we know that resilience is important. And I think that this step is so important because the way that you interpret things, it's all about perspective. And one of my friends shared a quote with me, and I don't remember who it's by, but it's one of my favorite now. They said that the people that argue whether the glass is half full or half empty miss the point. The glass is refillable. It's like, wow, what a shift, what a perspective shift that is. So when something happens to us, I think we might think in terms of black or white, half empty, half full. Is it good? Is it bad? But what if there's a whole other angle that we're missing? What if there's a whole different perspective that we could take that would help us interpret it differently and become more resilient? The next is T, take action. So do one small thing. Because studies in cognitive therapy and research show that even a tiny intentional step forward can break the cycle of rumination, lift your mood, and restore a sense of control. And resilient people don't just feel differently, they do something, even if it's small, to keep moving forward. And I like that step as well because one thing that I've heard a lot, if I am struggling, is, oh, just get up and move. It's like, well, that's actually the last thing that I want to do right now. But thank you. I will take that into consideration. Thanks. Appreciate it. But I like the way that this research breaks it down because even a tiny intentional step forward can break that cycle of rumination. Now, ruminating is a whole different topic, but I think that what can hold us back, at least in my case, from being at our most resilient sometimes, and what can keep us from bouncing back is getting stuck ruminating and just constantly beating yourself up. And it almost becomes a rhythm. So you want to interrupt that rhythm. And you don't have to go run a marathon. You don't even have to run a mile. Maybe you just get up. I saw Mel Robbins talk about this the other day in a video clip, but maybe you just go for a walk around the block. And it can shift depending on what happened, how bad you're feeling, and what you're capable of. We're not asking to completely push your boundaries, but just doing one small step to regulate your nervous system, to let your body know that you are okay, and to stop the rumination is a super important step. So that's the framework. And basically, I think that this matters now more than ever because resilience pays off in health, performance, dollars. Individuals with higher resilience repeat lower burnout, emo- they report lower burnout, lower emotional exhaustion, and resilience links to better job performance, partly because it helps sustain work engagement, but it relates to fewer absences and less lost productivity. But this is where AI comes in. and I called it the bounce back bot. And I told you why I built it, but I'll tell you a little bit about how it walks through the framework. So let's say, and you just start the conversation with it. Let's say that you type in, I didn't get the promotion I was promised, thought it was a go, like this changes everything. And then the bounce back bot, first it's going to come in and it's going to help you have that grace for yourself and be a source of validation, right? It'll let you know that it's remind you that it's okay not to feel okay, and that guess what? That is pretty crappy. I think sometimes we also there's a term toxic positivity, and I don't love that because I feel like the word toxic just gets thrown around and put in front of everything. But if you so quickly jump when something bad happens to feeling totally fine and even better, I think sometimes that's okay. But if it's a big thing that truly is upsetting, one, you're not in touch with your own emotions if you don't feel that pain and you're automatically okay. And two, I don't think you really get to process it, and you try to just plow forward and keep building on top of it, keep stacking wins on top of that hurt, but you're building it on a shaky foundation because it's there in the back of your mind. And eventually, that emotion's going to come out, whether you explode, whether you have a breakdown. So, actually, having grace, processing it, knowing that it hurts and you're disappointed, the bot's going to help you do that and help you be kind to yourself because, again, that self talk is probably not the best right now when you're going through something difficult. Next are with recognize. It'll help you identify that specific emotion. And if you have used large language models like ChatGPT or Claude, you know how good they are with words. But sometimes it's hard to put how we feel into words. So that step with recognize, how can we recognize our emotion if we can't come up with the word for it, if we don't know what it is? But the bot will come back and it'll say, well, based on what happened, maybe you're feeling embarrassed, maybe you're feeling rejected, you're feeling shame, you're feeling guilt. And even if it doesn't nail it with one of those words, it gets you thinking. It's like, well, do I feel shame? Do I feel guilt? What do I feel? And then you'll move on to interpret. So the bounce back bot then will offer reframes to you. So as you go through this framework, by the way, I'll say that you'll go through it at your own pace. With some things, you'll go through the grace and the interpret, and you'll be on to the next one, and go through the whole framework. For some, maybe you just need to sit in that grace a little bit more, or maybe interpret is going to take you a bit more time. That's totally fine. So go at your own speed. But going back to interpret, the bot offers reframes. So for example, you now have clear data about how this company values you, or the skills that made you promotable are still yours to leverage, and it might not. This might help you pursue another opportunity now, right? Because through this process of interviewing and almost getting a role that's a promotion, now maybe you've met a senior director and a VP, and you can turn around and ask them to be your mentor. And that's going to open up a door for you in 6 months when another role comes up. And then lastly is take action. So one small step that you could take today. Is it updating your LinkedIn? Is it reaching out to one contact? Taking a walk to clear your head? Anything you can do at your pace to get yourself out of that negative cycle so you do bounce back. And then you can even ask to help you come up with a plan, come up with a bounce back blueprint. So you name the setback clearly, you identify the emotions, you list strengths to leverage, and set small achievable goals. And it can help you, actually plan out your next steps. But I built this because we all face these moments. I mean, I'm sitting here talking about resilience. I'm not the most resilient person ever. Surprise, shocker. Goes without saying, I'm a human. I'm not always resilient. It's a word, a trait, and a way of being that I strive for. but I'm extremely far from perfect. Um, I'm lucky to have been around some really resilient people throughout my life, and I think that's the reason why um, feels really close to me and something that I mean, yeah, I've had setbacks, haven't we all? I haven't had the toughest life in the world by any means. I'm extremely grateful for my life. I've had a wonderful life, but it's more of a mindset. It's more of trying to be the opposite of rigid so I can be a net positive for me, for the people I interact with, for the team that I'm on. And when I think about my why in life, it really is a big part of it. Well, my why is to help people belong, help people feel that they belong, so they believe in themselves and the power of learning and become whoever they want to be. I'm big on coaching and development. But as I really dig into the why behind my why, it's to make the biggest impact, the biggest positive impact that I can. And how could I do that if I'm not practicing emotional resilience? If I'm not practicing sharpening my mentality? And whether it's at work, whether it's one day when I hopefully have a family, I want to be someone that is always continuously trying to better myself. And although we all fall short, I will, you will, and that's okay. But it's the awareness and the willingness to practice and to improve. And now that we have technology like AI, I can't see a way around not using it to not only accelerate my learning, but accelerate my personal development. I mean, it helps me accelerate in many aspects of my life, but personal growth is a big one. But I want to give an example just of what I think true resilience is. And it goes back to saying that resilience isn't always loud. I think resilience looks like someone who is a servant leader. And I've been really lucky to grow up with great role models who have shown me what resilience looks like. Um, when I think about resilience and grit, I think about my Uncle Rick, and he served as a Navy SEAL for more than 20 years. And then he was a coach for the Navy SEAL Buds training program. But going back to his time in Buds, his class voted him as the person that they would most want as a swim buddy. So the highest form of trust in that environment, basically. So he's the definition of a servant leader, always putting others first. He's also one of the most humble people, if not the most humble person that I know, even though he's by far the most courageous. And Rick's resilience is quiet and it's internal. It's not something that he needs to broadcast, given everything that he's done, even with that amazing track record of courage, of grit, of persevering. I can't imagine what he went through during training camp and actually with being deployed. But his resilience is quiet and internal. And because of that, he's able to not just be there for himself, but he's able to be there for others and be the person that they would most want as their swim buddy. So I'll leave us with the quote, and it's a quote that I was actually gifted from my Uncle Rick after I graduated college, and it's become one of my favorites. It's a bit longer, but it's incredibly impactful. And it's called The Man in the Arena by Theodore Roosevelt. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, and comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Thank you.